A simple woman walked into a high-end martial arts academy hoping to find healing. The instructor humiliated her in front of everyone, convinced she didn't belong. But what she did next left the entire room speechless and turned her into a legend. Dorchester wasn't exactly known for upscale apartments or postcard-perfect views. It was a blue-collar neighborhood, a place where people kept to themselves and minded their own business. That suited Emily Carter perfectly. Her humble two-bedroom unit on the third floor of an aging brick building on Savin Hill Avenue gave her the privacy she'd longed for since leaving the Marines. The walls were thin enough for her to hear the neighbor's TV, but that didn't bother her. The constant hum helped block out the occasional nightmares that lingered from her time overseas. Each morning, Emily rose before the sun, a habit deeply rooted from her years in the military. She brewed a pot of strong black coffee in her modest kitchen, then sat quietly by the window watching as the neighborhood gradually woke up and people made their way toward the subway down the street. Her apartment held only the essentials: a worn sofa she'd bought secondhand, a wooden dining table with two mismatched chairs, and a bookcase filled with medical journals and military history books. Personal touches were minimal. A framed photograph of her father proudly wearing his Marine dress blues, and a shadow box displaying his medals and the dog tags she now kept close around her neck. After her coffee, Emily dressed and headed to her job as a physical therapist at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center in Jamaica Plain. Her co-workers admired her quiet, no-nonsense style and the genuine bond she shared with the veterans in her care. Yet none of them knew she'd served herself. She'd never shared that part of her story. To them, Emily was just an empathetic therapist who understood better than most the struggles their patients faced. Working at the center gave Emily a renewed sense of purpose, something she desperately needed since receiving a medical discharge from the Corps 4 years earlier. Emily had dedicated 8 years to the Marines, training fellow soldiers in SCAR's Special Combat Aggressive Reactionary System, a brutally effective military fighting method designed for combat scenarios. Her career ended abruptly when a roadside bomb in Afghanistan embedded shrapnel deep into her right shoulder, resulting in an unwanted medical discharge. Physically, the wounds had healed into a jagged scar, a spot she unconsciously touched when anxious, but the mental scars ran deeper still. Her marriage hadn't survived the stress of civilian life. David, her ex-husband, grew distant as Emily struggled to adjust to life outside the military, resulting in financial troubles and frequent moves. On the night he left, David stood by the door, his suitcase packed, and said simply, "You need to stop clinging to who you were and figure out who you are now." Emily hadn't argued. Perhaps he'd been right. Their divorce had finalized 6 months earlier, around the time she first stepped into Apex Combat Academy. She'd always found solace in physical discipline, and after several veterans she mentioned how martial arts had significantly aided their recovery, Emily decided to try it herself. Apex Academy was situated in a wealthy part of town, occupying a renovated industrial building equipped with state-of-the-art gear and filled with clients who paid premium fees. Emily stretched her budget to afford membership, justifying it as a necessary investment in herself. Derek Lawson, the lead instructor, had made a strong impression from their first encounter, and not a good one. A former MMA competitor whose best achievements were a handful of regional wins, Derek carried himself like someone who felt the world owed him more respect than he'd ever received. He wore his black belt arrogantly, expecting newcomers to instantly recognize his authority. When Emily first asked about classes, he'd barely concealed his disdain, glancing dismissively over her unassuming appearance. "We do have a few women training here," he'd said condescendingly, as if offering a rare privilege. "But don't mistake this for cardio kickboxing. It's tough." Emily had quietly nodded, paid her fee, and enrolled in beginners classes 3 nights a week. For months, she kept to herself, arriving early and leaving promptly afterward. She absorbed each new skill methodically, bringing the discipline from her Marine background into practice on the mats. While other students struggled with basic moves, Emily's instincts and her body seemed naturally attuned to the aggressive yet efficient style that scars had ingrained in her. She preferred being underestimated rather than standing out, but despite her efforts to blend in, her natural talent became impossible to hide, eventually capturing the attention and jealousy of Derek and his students. The situation that left Emily standing humiliated on the training mats didn't just happen out of thin air. Tension had been simmering for weeks, ever since Derek spotted her discreetly adjusting her training partner's stance during a drill. "If you think you're smarter than me, Carter, maybe you should run the class," he'd announced sarcastically, loud enough to draw everyone's attention. Emily quietly apologized and stepped away, but the damage was done. She'd committed the cardinal sin of challenging Derek's authority, and he'd been waiting for his moment ever since. That moment came during the Advanced Scars class, which Emily had only recently been allowed to join. Derek called her to the center supposedly to demonstrate how to defend against a larger opponent, but instead of teaching, he'd intended to embarrass her. He knocked her legs from under her with excessive force, sending Emily slamming onto the mat so hard that her breath escaped in a painful rush. As the laughter faded around her, Emily calmly tucked her dog tags back inside her GI and stood up. She kept her face neutral, even though anger boiled beneath her composed exterior. "Thank you for the demonstration, sir," she said softly, bowing as required. Derek's smirk grew wider as he turned to the class. "This is exactly why proper training matters. Some people just aren't cut out for this, no matter how hard they try." His message couldn't have been clearer. Emily wasn't welcome here. Returning quietly to her place among the other students, Emily overheard Lily, a younger woman standing nearby, whisper mockingly, "That's what happens when soccer moms try to act tough." More quiet laughter rippled through the group. Emily endured the rest of the class without complaint, methodically performing each move while ignoring the sideways looks and whispered jokes. When Derek assigned sparring partners, he deliberately excluded her. "Carter, sit this round out and watch. Maybe you'll pick something up," he ordered dismissively. Emily leaned against the wall, silently observing each pair, noting strengths and weaknesses. It wasn't the first time she'd been sidelined, and she doubted it would be the last. After class, as everyone else headed to the locker rooms, Derek approached her again. "The mats need cleaning. You're not using them right anyway, might as well be useful." He tossed a spray bottle and a towel at her feet before walking off. Emily waited patiently until the gym emptied, then quietly began cleaning. The work itself didn't bother her. She'd handled far worse duties in the military. It was the calculated attempt to degrade her that stung most. As she finished cleaning the mats, she noticed Charles Reed, the academy's owner, silently watching from his office doorway. Charles was more businessman than martial artist, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a constant calculating look in his eyes. He'd turned Apex into one of Boston's top martial arts academies, his office walls decorated with photos of him shaking hands with famous athletes and celebrities who trained there. "Emily, isn't it? Come have a quick word," Charles called, gesturing for her to join him. She set down the cleaning supplies and stepped into his office, automatically standing at attention while he settled behind his polished wooden desk. "I've been keeping an eye on your progress." He started pressing his fingertips together thoughtfully. "Derek has raised some concerns about whether you're a good fit here." Emily stood calmly, showing no emotion as she waited for him to continue. "Apex has a certain standard of excellence to uphold. We don't hand out awards just for trying," he continued, clearly waiting for a response. Emily simply held his gaze silent and composed. Charles sighed, then said bluntly, We have women-only beginner classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable there." It wasn't a suggestion, but rather an obvious instruction. "With respect, sir, I've already paid for the advanced classes," Emily responded steadily. Charles's face tightened slightly. "Then there's also the issue of your membership fee. Advanced classes now have additional training requirements, so there'll be an extra $60 monthly fee." The tactic was clearly meant to push her out financially, but Emily didn't react. "I understand. Should I include that in next month's payment?" she asked calmly. Momentarily taken aback by her composure, Charles replied, "Yes, and I'll also need you to sign this waiver allowing us to use your image in our promotional materials." He slid the document across his desk. Emily glanced quickly at the wording, noticing the clause granting Apex rights to any photos or videos, including, she assumed, today's humiliating demonstration. Without hesitation, she signed her name with the same calm control she always maintained. Things got worse the following week. Emily arrived at the academy to find screenshots from the humiliating takedown pinned on the bulletin board captioned, "Technique gone wrong." Students she'd once practiced alongside began avoiding her. When Emily approached a group looking for a partner, one man loudly remarked, "We need someone who can actually contribute." Conversations would abruptly stop whenever she came near resuming, only after she passed by in quiet whispers. Emily found her gym bag moved from its usual place in the locker room to an awkward spot near the bathroom, a clear signal about where she stood in the academy's pecking order. Derek intensified his attempts to humiliate her, repeatedly singling her out as an example of poor technique during demonstrations. "Pay attention, class. This is how beginners mess up," he'd say, forcing Emily to hold positions that aggravated her old shoulder injury, while slowly and publicly pointing out every mistake. Whenever potential new members toured the academy, Derek made sure to openly criticize her. "Some people just can't grasp basic skills no matter how much effort they put in," he'd remarked loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "But here at Apex, we accept everyone, even those who'll never improve." Soon, the ridicule didn't just stop at Apex. At an open mat event hosted by another local academy where fighters from various schools gathered to train together, Emily heard whispers the moment she walked in. "That's the woman from Apex, the one who doesn't know her place." Nobody volunteered to spar with her, and when she finally asked someone directly, they suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. At the coffee shop near the academy, Emily overheard two of her classmates chatting as they waited in line, unaware she stood behind them. "Did you catch that pathetic attempt at an arm lock yesterday?" One laughed. "Derek says she's proof some people should stick to yoga." They noticed her too late, visibly uncomfortable but offering no apology. The barista overheard the exchange, quietly adding an extra shot to Emily's latte without charging. "Ignore the jerks," she said softly as she handed over the cup, a rare act of kindness amidst growing hostility. The humiliation even reached into Emily's private life. Her ex-husband David sent a text after coming across one of the videos circulating online. "This is exactly why I left. You never knew when to quit. Always trying to prove something instead of accepting your limits." Emily stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without a reply. At the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, she noticed coworkers acting strangely distant. One regular patient, a retired businessman recovering from knee surgery, requested another therapist without explanation. Later, Emily overheard the receptionist mentioning he'd seen the online video and felt uncomfortable having someone with poor judgment handling his therapy. Even her landlord, after seeing her practicing movements in the courtyard, warned sternly, "Keep that violent stuff out of here. We've got kids living in the building." Financially, the additional fees Apex imposed began taking their toll. Emily picked up extra weekend shifts at the rehab center and tightened her budget to cover the higher costs. She refused to be priced out or bullied into quitting. Despite all of it, Emily returned to Apex night after night, maintaining the quiet resolve she'd developed during her years in the Marines. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every attempt to isolate her became fuel to keep her moving forward. Each evening, she'd clear furniture aside in her apartment, practicing drills alone, honing technique through endless repetition. What nobody at Apex knew was that twice a week, Emily attended another training group at a community center in Dorchester, led by Master Sergeant James Wilson, a former Marine combat instructor she'd recognized as a patient at the VA hospital. Wilson had spotted her right away, recognizing her military posture and guarded alertness, even dressed in civilian clothes. After one of his therapy sessions, he'd approached her directly. "You're wasted here, Carter," he'd said plainly. "You should be teaching, not just doing therapy." When Emily explained her training at Apex in SCARS, Wilson had nodded approvingly. "That's good training. I've got a small group at the community center. It's low-key, nothing fancy, but you'll find real instruction and real respect there. Join us sometime." Under Wilson's quiet guidance, Emily quickly advanced far beyond the level she'd shown at Apex. She mastered techniques Derek still fumbled with regularly. Wilson knew exactly why she kept her true skills hidden. "Being underestimated can be your biggest advantage," he'd said one evening after practice. "But eventually you've got to reveal what you're truly capable of. The trick is knowing the right moment to do it." That moment arrived sooner than Emily anticipated. The Boston Open SCARS tournament was a highly respected regional competition drawing participants from academies across New England. Apex always sent a strong team with Derek, competing in the elite black belt division and typically finishing among the top competitors. Emily registered quietly for the women's blue belt division, despite officially remaining at the white belt level at Apex. Derek had deliberately held her back, another tactic to remind her of her supposed inadequacy. When Emily submitted her tournament registration through Apex, Derek confronted her openly in front of the entire class. "Carter," he'd said sharply, "I saw you signed up for the tournament. Are you trying to make a fool of yourself and this academy? You're nowhere near ready to compete." Emily stayed composed, quietly responding, "I'd just like a chance to test myself, sir." Derek's face flushed with irritation. "Test yourself? You've got to be kidding. Save yourself from embarrassment, I'm pulling your registration." But Derek was too late. Emily's registration was already processed, and she'd paid the non-refundable fee. The tournament rules stipulated that academy approval was necessary to register, but not required to compete. Once registered, a loophole Derek couldn't undo, and it enraged him. On tournament morning, the air carried a sharp spring chill. Emily woke as usual before dawn, but today was different. She sat quietly on the edge of her bed, clutching her father's dog tags tightly. Staff Sergeant Robert Carter had served honorably in the Marines for 2 decades before retiring to teach history at a high school back in their Pennsylvania hometown. He'd passed away from cancer 2 years before Emily's own injury in Afghanistan, missing the struggles she'd faced adjusting to civilian life. "Stay focused on the mission, ignore everything else," he'd always advised when she faced tough situations. Today, she intended to follow exactly that advice. Emily carefully tucked the dog tags beneath her tournament guy and headed for the convention center. The Apex team had planned to meet in the lobby, but when she arrived, she received cold stares and deliberate silence. Derek stood at the center of the group, offering last-minute instructions to his favorite competitors and pointedly ignoring Emily. Lily, the same young woman who'd mocked Emily after Derek's demonstration, approached her smugly. "This briefing is for actual competitors," she said, smiling unpleasantly. "Derek doesn't want you distracting the real athletes." Emily simply nodded and moved away, finding a quiet spot to start her warm-up routine. She stretched and did breathing exercises, mentally centering herself, just as she'd learned during her years as a Marine. While warming up, she observed her teammates, noting how Derek enthusiastically coached the male competitors, but barely acknowledged the two women from Apex competing that day. The tournament area quickly filled with participants and spectators from dozens of regional academies. Across the hall, Emily spotted Master Sergeant Wilson arriving with his small Dorchester group. When their eyes met, Wilson offered her the slightest nod of encouragement, something that meant more to Emily than any hollow pep talk from Derek. Her division women's blue belt was scheduled for early afternoon, giving her plenty of time to watch other matches and get mentally ready. Emily studied the Apex team's initial performances carefully. Derek shouted directions loudly from the sidelines, and most of the team advanced through their first matches, easily reflecting their academy's strong reputation. When Lily competed in the women's purple belt division, Derek's coaching intensified dramatically. He showed a level of enthusiasm Emily had never experienced from him. Lily won her first match decisively, but lost narrowly in the semifinals. Returning to the team area in tears, she was immediately comforted by Derek. "You were robbed," he said loudly enough for referees nearby to overhear. "That takedown was perfect." Later that morning, an announcement over the loudspeaker caused murmurs throughout the crowd. "Attention competitors in the men's black belt division, due to an injury withdrawal, we have one open spot. Tournament rules require filling it with the next eligible alternate. Would Emily Carter please report immediately to the registration desk?" The Apex group fell silent, turning to stare at Emily in confusion. Derek, furious, quickly marched toward the official's table. Calmly picking up her gear, Emily followed at a respectful distance as Derek confronted the tournament organizer. "This has to be a mistake," Derek insisted. "Emily Carter is just a white belt at my academy. There's no way she's eligible for the black belt division." The official, a stern woman in her 60s with decades of martial arts experience, checked the registration on her computer. "According to our records, Ms. Carter was listed as an alternate based on a submission for expert-level consideration. Her qualifications were confirmed by Master Sergeant James Wilson, a certified instructor with authority to endorse competitors at this level." Derek spun around to Emily, shock and anger mingling on his face. "Qualifications? What is this, some kind of fraud?" Before Emily could reply, Master Sergeant Wilson stepped quietly to her side. "There's no fraud here, Lawson. Staff Sergeant Carter was one of the Marine Corps' finest instructors in scars until a medical discharge ended her military career. She's more than qualified for this division." Wilson's words rippled through the gathered competitors like a shockwave. Emily's teammates from Apex stared at her in astonishment as everything suddenly clicked into place. Her unusual composure under pressure, rapid learning curve, calloused hands, and quiet confidence that had always hinted at experience far beyond civilian training. Derek struggled to regain control, nearly shouting now, "This is ridiculous! She's never shown anything close to black belt level skills in my gym." The tournament director's patience visibly thinned. "Mr. Lawson," the tournament director said firmly, "the verification has already been completed in line with tournament guidelines. Either Ms. Carter fills the spot, or we move on to the next alternate. Those are your only choices." Derek glanced around nervously, realizing their confrontation had attracted quite a crowd. Competitors and spectators had gathered curious about the unexpected drama. With no graceful way out and unwilling to look petty in front of everyone, Derek grudgingly conceded. "Fine," he muttered angrily. "Let her embarrass herself." As he turned to walk away, the director's voice stopped him. "Actually, Mr. Lawson, according to the updated bracket, you'll be facing Ms. Carter in the first round." Derek froze mid-step, slowly, turning back, shock and panic flashing across his face. That can't be right," he stammered. But it was true, and everyone standing nearby knew it. The scene had drawn too much attention to change matchups now without appearing biased or manipulative. Derek had effectively trapped himself. Word of the unusual matchup spread rapidly throughout the venue, drawing an even larger audience when Emily and Derek were called to their mat. Most anticipated either a quick humiliation for Emily or possibly an exciting upset. Emily calmly removed her warm-up jacket, revealing toned arms with defined muscles that her baggy everyday clothes normally concealed. Some Apex students audibly gasped, suddenly aware they'd badly underestimated their quiet teammate. Derek attempted to keep up his cocky demeanor as they bowed to each other and the referee, but the tension around his eyes revealed his anxiety. The referee blew the whistle, signaling the start of the match. Derek moved aggressively, trying to assert dominance immediately with a firm, intimidating grip. Emily remained poised, playing defensively, quietly assessing his moves and timing. Then, with smooth precision, she executed a flawless sleeve drag maneuver, creating just enough space to set up an arm lock. Her movements were so effortless and clean that Derek had no chance to defend himself. Just 14 seconds after the match began, Emily had fully secured Derek's arm, applying textbook-perfect pressure. The crowd went silent as Derek frantically tapped the mat in submission. The referee raised Emily's hand to indicate her victory, while Derek stood up hurriedly, flushed with embarrassment and fury. 14 seconds! Someone shouted clearly from the audience, checking the timer again. She tapped him out in just 14 seconds. Whispers and murmurs filled the area as Derek stormed off without the customary handshake, shoving past his astonished teammates. Emily remained calm at the center of the mat, respectfully bowing to the referee and judges before stepping aside. Master Sergeant Wilson approached her, extending his hand with a rare, proud smile. "Excellent work, Carter. Your father would have been very proud." Emily's expression softened momentarily at the mention of her father. Her fingers briefly brushed the dog tags hidden under her GI. "Thank you, sir." Walking back to collect her gear, Emily passed by the Apex group. Most looked away awkwardly, but Lily stared openly, her earlier arrogance replaced by confusion and emerging respect. Emily continued advancing steadily through subsequent rounds, showcasing the same focused precision. She didn't win the entire division. Her semifinal opponent was a seasoned, world-class competitor with years more experience, but her impressive performances prompted tournament officials to carefully review footage of her matches, particularly the quick defeat of Derek Lawson. What they discovered raised uncomfortable questions about Apex Combat Academy and the culture Derek had fostered. Videos of Emily's matches quickly circulated online, stirring outrage among respected martial arts instructors over her unjust treatment. Officials received numerous reports detailing Derek's abusive behavior, both at the tournament and within the academy. Facing growing backlash, Charles Reed swiftly tried distancing Apex from Derek's actions. "We're thoroughly investigating the situation," he assured concerned Academy members the following Monday. Apex is fully committed to fostering a respectful and supportive training environment. Behind closed doors, Charles's worries were primarily financial. Negative publicity had already slowed new member sign-ups, and several existing clients threatened to leave if immediate action wasn't taken. Derek was promptly suspended pending an internal investigation, a move that appeared more focused on protecting Apex's reputation rather than addressing genuine issues. When Emily arrived for class that evening, she immediately sensed the subdued atmosphere. Students who'd once openly mocked or shunned her were now uncertain how to treat her. Charles intercepted her before she entered the mats. "Emily, could I talk with you privately?" In his office, Charles offered an apology that felt superficial given how long he'd silently allowed Derek's behavior. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding regarding your experience and abilities," he began awkwardly. "We deeply value you as a member and want to rectify this." Then came a blatantly obvious attempt to capitalize on her newfound respect and credibility. "We'd like to offer you a position here as our new women's self-defense instructor. Your military experience would be great for marketing our academy," Charles added hopefully. Emily politely turned him down, maintaining the quiet dignity she'd shown throughout her struggles at Apex. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Reed, but I've accepted a position somewhere else." Technically, that wasn't true yet, but it soon would be. The following day, Emily officially resigned from the academy, requesting a refund for her most recent month's membership. Charles accepted immediately, eager to avoid any further conflict or publicity. In the weeks that followed, Emily continued working at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, quietly building a specialized program, blending physical therapy with scars adapted specifically for veterans recovering from trauma. The center's director, impressed by her skill set and by veterans eager to train after hearing about Emily's tournament experience, offered her space and resources for twice-weekly evening classes. It didn't take long before Emily's sessions had a waiting list. Among her first students were 2 female veterans coping with PTSD and injuries sustained during combat. After an especially challenging class, one told her, "You understand us in ways others don't. It's not just techniques, it's about getting our power back." Meanwhile, Derek desperately tried saving face by disputing the tournament outcome, claiming Emily had exaggerated her qualifications. But his efforts quickly backfired. An investigation uncovered numerous instances of bullying and unfair treatment of students, especially women who had threatened Derek's authority. Several former members came forward providing clear evidence of a toxic pattern that Apex couldn't dismiss as isolated incidents. Derek's teaching suspension became permanent, and his rank faced scrutiny from martial arts governing bodies. Although they ultimately didn't strip his black belt, the public humiliation effectively ended any hope he had of regaining respect as an instructor. About a month later, Emily was standing at the counter of her regular coffee shop when Derek unexpectedly walked in. The room fell quiet as he approached, her anger and embarrassment clearly visible on his face. "You humiliated me," he said loudly enough to draw attention. "You purposely hid who you really were." Emily met his eyes calmly, replying evenly, "I never lied about my background. You simply never cared enough to ask." She picked up her coffee and walked past him without another word, refusing to give him the confrontation he sought. They never spoke again. Gradually, Boston's martial arts community adjusted to Emily's new prominence. Several progressive schools invited her to lead workshops or train with them, appreciating the unique insights she brought. Surprisingly, Lily was among the first from Apex to reach out timidly, arriving at one of Emily's classes for veterans. "I came to apologize," Lily admitted uncomfortably. "The way I treated you was wrong, there's no excuse." Emily graciously accepted her apology. "We all judge people based on incomplete information," she told Lily gently. "What matters most is being willing to reconsider when you learn something new." Lily asked permission to volunteer with Emily's program, which Emily agreed to on the condition Lily fully understood the sensitive nature of working with trauma survivors. This marked the beginning of a mentorship that later inspired Lily to study physical therapy herself. Even Charles Reed tried to mend fences, offering Emily the role of head instructor at a newly planned Apex facility, promising complete freedom over teaching style and training culture. She politely declined, but seized the moment to encourage Reed to reform how Apex treated students of different backgrounds and abilities. 6 months after the tournament, Emily's trauma recovery and scars program had expanded to 3 separate locations throughout Boston, supported by both the VA and community health grants. She continued working at the Veterans Center, but reduced her hours slightly to manage the growing demand for her training sessions. Master Sergeant Wilson became her assistant instructor, his straightforward style and technical knowledge perfectly complementing her calmer, more thoughtful approach. Together, they developed a curriculum that equally prioritized physical healing and emotional resilience. Emily always wore her father's dog tags visibly during classes, no longer hiding them beneath her GI. They became her trademark, symbolizing the discipline and honor inherited from her father's service. The arm lock that quickly defeated Derek, humorously became known among students as the 14-second solution, though Emily discouraged emphasizing that particular story. It's not the technique itself that's special, she'd remind them. It's preparation, discipline, and timing qualities anyone can develop with the right training. On the anniversary of her father's passing, Emily traveled to Pennsylvania, visiting his grave as she did each year. She placed a small stone carefully on his headstone, and beside it, left a recent photograph of herself surrounded by her students, veterans who, like her, had rediscovered strength and hope through discipline, community, and martial arts. "You were right, Dad," Emily whispered softly to the granite headstone. "The mission is what matters, not the noise." Turning away, she noticed an older man standing at a polite distance, leaning gently on his cane. He carefully approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You're Robert Carter's daughter, aren't you? The one teaching veterans up in Boston." Emily nodded, curious. How he knew her father. "I'm Richard Townsend," he said warmly. "Your dad and I served together in Lebanon long before you were born. He saved my life during the barracks bombing." Richard's gaze drifted away briefly, lost in memories. Robert never spoke much about it. He didn't want any special credit. He always said he just did what had to be done and moved forward to the next mission. His eyes returned to Emily, a gentle smile crossing his aged face. "You remind me of him. Same quiet strength. I know he'd be incredibly proud of what you're doing." The unexpected meeting felt like a circle finally closing, a quiet reassurance that her chosen path honored not just her father's memory, but everything he had stood for. Returning to Boston, Emily kept developing her veterans training program, always prioritizing those who needed it most over those who could pay the highest fees. Soon, military and civilian groups noticed her unique approach, leading to invitations to create similar trauma recovery programs nationwide. The 14-second victory that dramatically shifted Emily's life soon became a small footnote within a larger story of growth and dedication. Whenever curious new students brought up the infamous tournament, she would briefly acknowledge it before swiftly directing their focus back toward mastering foundational skills. Respect, discipline, perseverance. She always told them those are your real foundations. Techniques are simply the tools. The dog tags that had accidentally slipped from beneath her GI during that first humiliating day at Apex had come to symbolize more than just her father's legacy. They now represented her own story as well, a powerful reminder that genuine strength often hides beneath a modest surface, waiting patiently for the right moment to appear. Some people mistake kindness for weakness, silence for acceptance. Emily's journey showed clearly that true strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about recognizing your own worth, even when no one else does. What struggles are you facing today that require this quiet kind of courage? If Emily's story inspired you, consider supporting our channel by subscribing and liking this video. We share the stories of remarkable, ordinary people every week, and you never know which one might change how you see things forever.